Well, Trump now looks to make alternative plans for January 20th. He's also slowly losing his social media megaphone as Facebook, Snapchat, and Instagram have banned him from posting. But some say it's not enough. Twitter has yet to enact a ban beyond an already expired 12-hour hold on his posts. Adam Sharp is Twitter's former head of news, government, and elections, and he joins me now. Adam, it's really great to have you with us. I wanted you to join us today because, as you wrote on Twitter yesterday, you were the founding head of Twitter Gov. That's the part of Twitter that focuses on what happens in government and elections. Now, although you're no longer at Twitter, you've been a defender of the way that Twitter has given Trump a pass when it comes to violating the platform's rules and policies. But you posted a thread yesterday about how your opinions have changed on the matter. You now think that Twitter should, in your words, quote, follow Facebook's lead and suspend Trump's personal account. What changed for you?
Well, I think, there were a number of reasons why I think it was an exceptional case to allow the account to stand. And, quite simply, it was because he was the president, that there are a number of things legally that the president is allowed to do and say that you and I are not. One of the first big tests of this was early in his presidency. People looked at tweets he made threatening Kim Jong-un and the North Korean regime, saying these are violent threats. These are a violation of Twitter's terms of service, and he should be suspended for that. And yeah, if you or I were to threaten someone and say, do what I want, or I bomb you to oblivion, that would be a violation of the rules and it would be a violation of law. But when the president says it, it is a statement of U.S. foreign policy. And so there are things that in the Constitution, the president is uniquely empowered to say and uniquely permitted to do and say. I also felt that, if the president is going down a swirl of madness, a private company should not be shielding the public gaze from that. A spotlight should be shine on that. It would be akin to if the president gives a rambling, incoherent speech and a private company were to dress it up and release a transcript saying this is what he said and it was perfectly polished oratory. That would not be an accurate reflection of the president's speech. And so I felt there was a public interest need to shine a light on it and demonstrate to the world that the emperor had no clothes. What I think was unique about yesterday was, for all the same reasons, the exceptional case of the presidency. The Constitution calls for the president to take a very specific oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution and the processes it enshrines. And more than any other individual, it mandates an arm's length relationship between the president and the Congress. So the specific acts the president took, and I'm sorry I said yesterday, I mean Wednesday, the specific acts, the specific language the president used on Wednesday inciting these riots on the Capitol were such an affront to the core precedents of the Constitution, where it specifically says, more than anyone else in the world, you, sir, cannot do this one thing. And so for all the logic that was used up to this point, that the president is an exceptional case for whom there are certain things he can do that no one else can, and therefore he should be permitted to stay on the platform. This is one of those exceptional cases where there are some things he explicitly cannot do far and above anyone else, where therefore he is uniquely and flagrantly in violation of the rules and should be suspended.
This is obviously something that you have thought a lot about because of your former job and also your change in the way that you view it. But I wonder what you would say to a critic, and there are plenty of them out there. I saw them all day yesterday on Twitter, who say this is just an example.
I certainly have a notifications feed that saw them too.
Yeah, imagine yours were quite full yesterday. You were getting a lot of those pings, who say, hey, this is just an example of big tech getting too big. This is an example of censorship. This is why the government needs to rein in big tech. They can't have this much power.
Well, I think there is a broader question that needs to be asked, which is, when you have created this, and Twitter for a while used the phrase public town square to describe itself, but I think it can be used to describe social media in general, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, how have you. One thing that makes fundamental rights work, in this case, the First Amendment, is that they are somewhat universal, at least within the country. I know my rights on my street corner are the same on that street corner as if I walk 2 streets over and stand on that street corner. That is not the truth in the digital domain. My rights as a citizen are not the same on Twitter as they are on Facebook, as they are on Reddit. And we engage in political speech on these platforms believing that we are in a public space, when in fact we are not. We are very much in a private space. And our free speech rights are being defined by the whims of executives of publicly traded companies. And so I think a conversation does need to be had. If you don't want government defining the parameters of free speech, do you want to hand that reign over to CEOs and executives of publicly traded companies whose loyalty is not necessarily to public ideals of free speech, but to shareholders and shareholder value? And are you creating a problem when you create sort of a Swiss cheese of rights, where your rights are different in one platform or another? And if you never really know what your rights are from one street corner to the other, do you really have a common understanding of rights, and does that devalue them? And so that is an important conversation to have. I think it's overly simplistic to say that it's big tech has gotten too big, because I think it's simply that no one else has stepped up to have this conversation. And so filling that void has been the companies. And I'm not sure the companies should be left to their own devices to make that decision.
Interesting.
It needs to be a societal conversation.
So I know you haven't been at Twitter for a few years, but take us into the discussion and the thought process that goes into banning an account.
Well, I think at the end of the day, the platforms all take very seriously the idea that they are the platform, that they are the connector, that the best response to bad speech is more good speech, that the moment you start drawing lines, you're always going to be stuck in this debate over, well, why didn't you draw the line over there, or why didn't you draw it over there? And so the best thing to do, or the ideal thing to do, is to create a public forum where there can be this exchange of ideas, and then to step back. Obviously, that when you get to the scale these platforms have gotten, tends to be a little naive. And I think what the companies found is that those perhaps ideals they had early on did not scale as quickly as the technology, and that proved to be a challenge later. Now, the challenge they then run into is that matter of scale. You have 500 million people tweeting a day. You can't adequately police that. So if you are sticking your thumb in over here and not over here, how are you affecting the equation? And then more importantly, it is impossible to divorce the dynamics that allow some speech to flourish from the dynamics that allow other speech to flourish. So yes, it is easy to blame the platforms and say, yes, you created the environment that allowed white supremacy to rise in the United States. You created the environment that allowed this mob to organize. But that environment also created the environment for the Black Lives Matter movement, the environment for the Me Too movement, the environment for the Arab Spring.
Yeah.
And you cannot divorce those dynamics from each other. And the moment you try to, it's no longer an engineering decision. It is no longer a platform decision where you are separating it. You are now making an editorial decision. And that is when you are asking big tech to make these subjective decisions of what speech should have access to this technology and what speech should not. And that's where I think you should be careful what you wish for before saying you want to hand those reins of government mandated censorship to publicly traded companies.
Adam, it's a very complicated issue, and we certainly appreciate your time and joining us on Quick Take today. That's Adam Sharp. He's the former head of government relations for Twitter, and he's also the current CEO of the Emmys. Adam, thanks again for joining us.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quick Take now for insight in an instant.